Zane, a German Shepherd, has been through more than any dog should endure. Trained for the most dangerous missions, he's faced countless battles by his handler's side. But when betrayal strikes, Zane is left for dead, tossed into the ocean. Will he make it back to the ones he loves? This story of loyalty, courage, and survival will touch your heart in ways you never imagined. What happens next will leave you speechless. Watch now to see how Zane's unwavering devotion defies all odds. Zane was no ordinary German Shepherd. He was born with a keen sense of loyalty and an unyielding courage that would eventually lead him into the heart of some of the most dangerous missions known to military canine units. His life began not as a soldier but as a pup with a natural talent for learning agility and obedience. His trainers quickly recognized his potential and knew that this dog would one day serve in a capacity far beyond what most dogs could endure. From the very start, Zane's training was rigorous. He wasn't just taught the basics of obedience, sit, stay, fetch, but the finer aspects of combat and detection. The military needed him to be fast, smart, and fearless. Over the years, Zane's bond with his handler grew stronger as they learned to trust each other in life or death situations. Each day was filled with tireless training, mastering scent detection, bomb-sniffing drills, and agility tests that would prepare him for the chaos of a battlefield. He became a tool of precision, a canine with instincts honed for survival and protection. Zane's first deployment was to Afghanistan, where he quickly proved himself to be indispensable. The terrain was unforgiving and the threat of danger was constant. He was tasked with searching for explosives in highly dangerous zones where each step could be the last. His keen nose and sharp instincts saved lives countless times. There was no hesitation in his movements. Zane would scan the ground, his focus unwavering until he found what others might miss: an improvised explosive device hidden just beneath the surface or a trap designed to target military personnel. He worked tirelessly alongside his human partners, sniffing out threats before they had a chance to cause harm. Zane had a unique ability to stay calm in the face of chaos, his body and mind synchronized to protect the lives of those around him. While other soldiers wore bulletproof vests, Zane wore his own kind of armor, his unwavering loyalty and fierce determination. Through thick dust and the sound of gunfire, Zane would charge ahead not as a mere animal, but as a true partner in combat. The scars that covered his body spoke volumes of his service. A gash along his flank from a close encounter with a sniper's bullet, the permanent limp from an injury sustained in an explosion. These marks weren't just signs of a rough life, they were badges of honor. Zane's body had become a testament to his dedication. However, there were no medals for the silent service of canines like Zane. His achievements often went unnoticed by the world, and the quiet heroism he displayed every day on the battlefield remained hidden behind the sound of gunfire and the shuffle of soldiers' boots. Yet to his team, Zane was irreplaceable. No human soldier could have shown more loyalty, more strength, or more bravery. Zane's story wasn't just one of fighting, though. It was about trust, sacrifice, and a bond formed in the heat of battle, a bond that would endure long after the last shot was fired. But as all wars do, the quiet before the storm signaled a new chapter in Zane's journey. Zane's time in Afghanistan had been marked by intense combat and an ever-present danger, but it was one particular mission that would change everything for him. The day started like any other, with Zane and his handler, Sergeant Ramirez, preparing to sweep a heavily fortified area. They had received intel about a potential insurgent hideout, and their task was to clear it. Zane, as always, was ready. His nose twitched, sensing the tension in the air. The scent of gunpowder dust and fear lingered in every corner of the battlefield. As they moved deeper into the area, the environment shifted. The usual sounds of battle faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. The ground beneath their feet felt unstable, as though something was lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to strike. Zane's ears perked up, his body tense alert to every sound. Suddenly, the silence was shattered. A barrage of gunfire erupted from an unseen position. The team was ambushed, caught completely off guard. In the chaos, Zane's instincts kicked in. He immediately lunged forward, tackling an enemy fighter who had appeared from behind a pile of rubble. The exchange was brief but brutal. Zane was quick and precise, biting through the enemy's gear and immobilizing him. However, the battle wasn't over. The sound of more gunfire, more threats closing in, forced the team to react fast. Zane's handler, Sergeant Ramirez, shouted for him to fall back, but as Zane turned to obey, he felt something sharp slice through his side. A bullet. Pain shot through his body, but Zane didn't flinch. His loyalty to Ramirez and his fellow soldiers was stronger than any injury. The team had to retreat, and Zane, despite the wound, pushed himself forward, knowing that he had to protect his handler. His legs grew weak and his vision began to blur. The bleeding from his side was relentless, but Zane was determined. He limped along with the rest of the team, moving cautiously yet resolutely as gunshots continued to ring out around them. By the time they reached the extraction point, Zane was barely able to stand. His side was slick with blood and his breathing was shallow. The medics on site immediately rushed to his side, but the situation was dire. Zane's injuries were serious, and the decision was made to evacuate him for further treatment. However, just as the helicopter arrived to airlift the wounded soldiers, the military's bureaucratic wheels began to turn. A shift in policies, red tape, and delays in care meant that Zane was not immediately prioritized for treatment. While other soldiers were rushed into medical care, Zane was left behind in the field hospital waiting. The hours stretched on. He lay in a cage, weak and exhausted, his body growing cold as his injury went untreated. His once fierce and powerful form now felt fragile. Zane had always been a loyal soldier, but the military, in its haste and confusion, had abandoned him. The bond between him and his handler, Sergeant Ramirez, was undeniable, yet in this moment, the military machine had failed him. Zane had given everything for his team, but now, in his time of need, the system had left him to suffer. Zane's body felt heavy, the wound in his side now a dull, constant throb. He had given everything for his team, but now, as he lay forgotten in a military facility, the realization hit him: the very system he had fought to protect had left him behind. Hours passed with no care, no comfort, just the cold reality that his value had been overshadowed by bureaucracy. He had saved countless lives, but now he was just another casualty, neglected and ignored. It was in this vulnerable state that the betrayal began. A group of mercenaries operating on the fringes of the war took notice of Zane's situation. These men had no loyalty, no moral code. To them, Zane was just another piece of equipment, valuable perhaps, but expendable. They had connections in the black market, and they knew just what to do with a trained war dog like Zane. Under the cover of darkness, they made their move. Zane was loaded onto a transport truck, still dazed and weak, his movements sluggish from the blood loss. He couldn't comprehend what was happening, the haze of pain and confusion clouding his mind. His body was a lifeless weight, and the world around him seemed to blur as the vehicle rumbled on, taking him further away from the safety of the military base. The truck eventually stopped at an old, unmarked freighter moored in the middle of the Gulf. There was no sign of civilization, no markings or flags to identify the vessel, just an eerie, cold silence. The men roughly dragged Zane off the truck, the coarse ropes cutting into his skin as they bound his limbs. Zane tried to fight back, but his body was too weak. His muscles trembled and his vision swam as he was thrown onto the ship's deck, the harsh light blinding him momentarily. The men spoke in low, guttural voices, their accents unfamiliar. They laughed as they tossed Zane around, treating him with less respect than a piece of discarded equipment. One of the mercenaries inspected Zane's collar, pulling it tight, and sneered at the canine's once proud markings. Two old ones had spitting on the deck. "Let's just get rid of him." Without hesitation, they dragged Zane to the edge of the ship. The air was thick with salt water, and the smell of the ocean was overpowering. Zane's heart pounded in his chest. His body was no longer the powerful machine it once was, but a broken shell. His mind, though, still clung to one truth: survival. His instinct to protect, to fight, had not wavered. They shoved him toward the rail, and Zane, unable to defend himself, felt the cold metal of a cinder block being attached to his collar. He could hardly process the weight of what was happening. With a final forceful shove, they threw Zane over the edge of the ship. The cold salt water hit him like a shock, the pressure of the deep pulling at his chest. For a brief moment, the world around him went black. The chain attached to the block yanked tight, and Zane felt his body sinking. His legs, already weakened from the previous injuries, struggled to propel him upwards, but the weight of the block was relentless. He was drowning, slipping further into the darkness of the ocean, knowing that no one would come for him. But even as the waves pulled him deeper into the abyss, Zane's spirit did not break. He was a soldier, a protector, and above all, he was a survivor. Zane's world was swallowed by the ocean. The ship's brutal act of betrayal left him sinking, the weight of the cinder block around his neck dragging him deeper into the cold black water. His body felt like it was being torn apart, his muscles screaming in pain as they tried to fight the pressure of the depths. His heart raced in panic, but his mind was calm, focused. The salt water burned as it filled his mouth, but Zane didn't thrash. He knew he had to conserve his strength. He had been trained for moments like this, though he had never imagined it would come to this. The weight on his neck, the heavy chain, kept pulling him lower, further away from the surface, deeper into the abyss. His legs, exhausted from the previous battle and the long hours of injury, moved weakly, barely able to push against the current. Each movement felt slower, more labored than the last. The once strong muscles in his back and legs, honed by years of training, were now barely responding. He could feel the cold seeping into his very bones, and for the first time in his life, he wondered if he would truly survive. As the darkness of the deep surrounded him, Zane felt the panic begin to rise. His vision blurred and his ears rang with the silence of the sea, drowning out the chaos that had filled his life moments ago. His body no longer had the strength to fight the waves. He was too far from the surface, too far from the world he had once known. The world felt like it was closing in on him, the weight of the cinder block a constant reminder of his betrayal. But Zane wasn't done yet. There was something deep within him, something that had carried him through the worst of battles that wouldn't allow him to give up. His training had taught him how to survive, how to keep going even when every instinct screamed for him to stop. He had been a soldier all his life, a protector of those he loved, and even now in the darkness of the sea, with the cold threatening to overwhelm him, Zane's will to survive burned brighter than ever. He forced his legs to move, pushing against the water with what little strength he had left. His breath was shallow and his body felt like it was made of stone, but still Zane fought. He kicked with all his might despite the weakness that drained him. He fought for his life, for the honor that had carried him through every mission, every battle. He fought for the one thing that had always driven him: survival. His body might have been broken, but his spirit was not. The waves swirled around him, cold and indifferent, but Zane kept going. His movements grew slower, but still he fought. He would not be forgotten. He would not die here. There was too much left to do. The wind howled across the water, and the darkness was thick, oppressive. On board the Navy SEALs reconnaissance vessel, Sergeant Jack Hayes scanned the horizon through his night vision goggles, his breath coming in steady, rhythmic puffs. The mission had been straightforward: an intel sweep. Yet something caught his eye. A faint, almost imperceptible movement in the water far off in the distance. At first, Jack thought it was a trick of the light, a ripple from the current, but the shape, it was too deliberate, too human-like. Jack zoomed in, focusing his lenses on the anomaly. His heart skipped a beat when he realized what he was seeing: a form struggling against the waves. There was no mistaking it now. He was looking at a dog. A dog alive, still fighting to stay afloat in the vast expanse of the ocean. Zane. It was unmistakable. The distinct markings of a military canine. Jack's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a stray dog, this was a soldier, his soldier. Jack's mind raced. The first thing that hit him was disbelief. Why was a dog out here in the middle of the ocean? But then, as the situation sank in, his instincts as a SEAL took over. He didn't need orders, he didn't need permission. Zane, the dog who had saved countless lives, now needed saving himself. The thought of letting this canine die alone out in the dark water was unbearable. Jack had seen too much loss, too many lives slip away. He wasn't going to let this one go. Without hesitating, Jack yanked off his gear, his boots hitting the deck with a heavy thud. He didn't bother waiting for instructions, he just moved. He could already feel the weight of the mission, the urgency in the moment. The team could wait. Zane couldn't. Jack rushed to the edge of the ship, his muscles tensed and ready. With a single glance toward the open sea, Jack dived into the blackness, the cold water engulfing him as he plunged downward. His body cut through the waves, and as soon as he surfaced, he began swimming with powerful strokes toward the form still barely visible on the horizon. Zane's struggle against the waves was heartbreaking. Jack could see the dog's movements growing weaker, his body exhausted from the relentless fight to stay afloat. Zane was slipping, sinking, and Jack knew that if he didn't get there in time, he would lose him. The ocean was unforgiving, the waves crashing with force that tried to swallow Jack whole. He pushed through the water with all his strength, each stroke a fight against the cold, each movement sapping more of his energy. Jack's muscles burned, but he focused only on the sight of Zane still struggling. "Hold on, Zane," he muttered through clenched teeth. The words were barely audible against the roar of the sea, but they were a promise that Jack wasn't going to let this dog die alone. As he closed the distance between them, Jack's heart pounded louder in his chest. Zane was still alive, still swimming, though the effort was clearly wearing him down. Jack's hands finally reached out to grab the dog, and Zane's tired eyes met his, recognition and a flicker of trust still present despite the exhaustion. Without another thought, Jack wrapped his arms around the dog, pulling him close, and braced himself against the churning sea. They weren't out of danger yet, but this was the first step. Jack knew the journey wasn't over. The hardest part was just beginning. The ocean raged around them, its powerful currents pushing and pulling, threatening to drown them both. Jack's grip on Zane tightened, but the waves made it nearly impossible to keep his hold. Every few seconds the water would surge, forcing him to fight against the tide, and yet Zane, though barely able to stay afloat, still clung to life with remarkable resilience. Jack's arms burned from exhaustion, but he couldn't afford to slow down. He could see the shoreline in the distance, but it seemed so far, a mere speck in the vast, endless blackness of the sea. The coldness of the water began to seep into his bones, and he could feel his own energy waning, but there was no room for weakness. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival. Zane was counting on him. "Come on, boy," Jack whispered, urging Zane, though the dog was too weak to respond. His body felt heavy in Jack's arms, but Jack held him closer, kicking his legs harder, desperate to keep them both afloat. The fight was far from over. Suddenly, something shifted beneath the water. A ripple, a disturbance. Jack's instincts flared. He looked down into the dark abyss, but could see nothing. The shadows of the deep seemed to move, undulating like a living entity. The hairs on the back of Jack's neck stood up as the unease crept through him. His training as a SEAL had taught him to trust his gut, and now it screamed at him to look out. Without warning, a dark shape shot up from beneath the waves. Jack barely had time to react before the massive figure lunged at them. A great white shark, its eyes cold and hungry, sliced through the water with terrifying speed. Jack's heart raced. There was no time to think. The shark's body was nearly as long as Jack was tall, and its jaws lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth snapped open as it barreled toward them. "Shit!" Jack shouted, using every ounce of strength to pull Zane closer to his chest. The shark's first attack missed, its massive head splashing through the water just inches away from them. But Jack could feel the pressure building. The creature was circling. It would strike again. The waves slammed against Jack's body, pushing him and Zane further from the boat and into the heart of the danger. Jack had no weapon, no knife, no harpoon, just the sea and the shark. The creature darted closer, its sleek body cutting through the water like a bullet. Jack could hear the thrashing of its tail, a warning that the shark was just waiting for the right moment. Zane stirred weakly in Jack's arms, his breathing shallow. Jack knew that he had mere moments before the shark would attack again, and this time he might not be able to fend it off. With a surge of adrenaline, Jack kicked his legs furiously, trying to keep himself and Zane out of the shark's path. But the beast wasn't fooled. It turned, closing in with lethal precision. Its dorsal fins sliced through the surface, a chilling sight that sent a fresh wave of fear through Jack's chest. The shark lunged forward, its massive mouth opening wide, a blur of teeth and terror. Jack, with nothing but instinct guiding him, threw his body in front of Zane, using his own mass to shield the dog. He twisted at the last second, hoping to avoid the fatal bite. In a split second, Jack felt a sharp sting, a glancing blow to his side, but he didn't have time to assess the damage. He was focused on Zane. He needed to get them both out of the water. The shark backed off, its hunger momentarily sated by the chaos of the attack. Jack, panting and bleeding, didn't hesitate. He pulled Zane closer, desperately trying to find the strength to push forward to get them both to safety. But the battle was far from over. They were still adrift in the merciless sea, and Jack knew they weren't out of danger yet. With every stroke, Jack's hope of survival dwindled, but the bond he shared with Zane, the unspoken trust between them, kept him going. They had survived the first attack, but would they survive the next? The shark's first attack had left Jack with a stinging pain, but it was nothing compared to the desperation coursing through him as he fought to save Zane. The water around them was still churning cold and unforgiving, and Jack knew they had no time to waste. He forced his body to move, his muscles burning each stroke, a battle against the relentless waves and the fierce threat that still lingered beneath them. Zane was barely holding on. His body, limp and weak, floated lifelessly in Jack's arms. The dog's breathing was shallow, ragged, and Jack could feel his pulse slowing. It was as if Zane had given everything he had, and now he was on the brink of slipping away. Jack's heart pounded as he desperately looked toward the horizon, searching for anything, a sign of help, a rescue team, anything. But the vastness of the ocean only mocked him. "Come on, Zane," Jack muttered under his breath, though he knew the dog couldn't hear him. Still, it was a promise, a reminder that he would not let his partner die in these cold, empty waters. He fought against the waves, the current tugging at him, pulling them both further away from the ship. But Jack refused to give in. With every ounce of strength, he pushed forward, each stroke feeling like it might be his last. The pain in his side was worsening, but Jack gritted his teeth and pressed on, determined to save Zane. He could feel the weight of the dog in his arms, and the coldness of Zane's body only fueled his desperation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jack spotted something ahead. The silhouette of a boat. It wasn't far, but the current was pushing them away, dragging them deeper into the night. Jack's heart raced as he kicked harder, pulling Zane closer to him. The boat was still a few yards away, but it was their only chance, the only hope left. Zane's body felt heavier with each passing second. Jack could feel the life slipping away from him. The shark had passed for now, but Jack knew they were still in danger. There was no guarantee they would survive the next attack. He had to get Zane to safety. With one last push, Jack pulled Zane toward the boat. The sound of the engine grew louder, and Jack could feel the pull of the vessel as it neared. He reached up, grabbing onto the side of the boat, and with all the remaining strength he had, he hauled Zane up, lifting him onto the deck. Zane's body was nearly lifeless, but Jack didn't let go. He didn't stop. He collapsed onto the deck, breathing heavily, his body racked with exhaustion, his muscles screaming. Zane lay beside him, motionless but still alive. Jack pressed his ear to Zane's chest, listening for a heartbeat. A faint thud, steady but weak, reassured him that the dog was still with him. For a moment, Jack just lay there, unable to move, his chest rising and falling with each labored breath. He had done it. They had made it. But the battle wasn't over. Zane still needed help, and Jack was determined to stay by his side no matter what. The crew of the boat scrambled around them, rushing to stabilize Zane and tend to Jack's wounds. Jack's vision swam, the adrenaline beginning to fade, but he held on to Zane's limp body with all the strength he had left. His partner, his friend, was still with him. As the boat's engines hummed softly beneath them, Jack stayed firmly by Zane's side, his hands still gripping the dog's fur, unwilling to let go. The crew worked quickly but with deliberate care as they transported Zane to the medical bay. The moment they reached the makeshift operating table, Zane was immediately surrounded by a team of doctors, each one focused on stabilizing him. Jack, however, didn't let them take full control. He stood there, a silent sentinel by Zane's side, watching with a mixture of exhaustion and concern as the doctors began their work. Zane's body was limp, barely responding to the efforts of the medical team. His coat, once gleaming with the pride of a soldier, was now matted with saltwater blood and dirt. The cuts and bruises on his body told a story of battles fought and survived, but this battle, the one against the ocean, against the betrayal, was different. The doctors moved quickly, tending to the gaping wound in Zane's side, applying pressure to stop the bleeding. They hooked him up to an IV, monitoring his vitals closely. His pulse was faint, but steady, the faint thud under the fur still beating with life. Yet Zane's breathing remained shallow, each breath more labored than the last. Jack stayed close, speaking in low, soothing tones. His words meant more for Zane's spirit than anything else. "You're going to make it, buddy. I'm right here," he said quietly, his voice rough with exhaustion. His own body ached from the ordeal, from the fight to get Zane to safety, but he didn't care. All that mattered now was that Zane would pull through. The crew worked tirelessly, checking Zane's temperature, administering fluids, and cleaning his wounds. It was an anxious, tense atmosphere, the medical staff moving swiftly but with care, all too aware of the seriousness of the situation. Jack, though, was quiet. He wasn't giving orders or making suggestions. He simply stood there, a silent presence of support. He gently stroked Zane's head, his fingers brushing through the matted fur, the same fur that had been so sleek and proud just hours earlier. The connection between them was undeniable. The bond forged through countless missions, through life-threatening moments on the battlefield, had only deepened in the wake of this crisis. Zane's eyes, though dull with fatigue, slowly fluttered open, meeting Jack's gaze for a fleeting moment. Jack felt a flicker of hope in his chest. Zane was still with him. Despite the near-death experience, the dog had held on, driven by his loyalty and love for his handler. "I'm here, Zane. We've got this," Jack whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He didn't know if the dog could hear him, but it didn't matter. The words were a promise. As the minutes stretched into hours, Jack never left Zane's side. He wiped the dog's face with a damp cloth, speaking to him softly, recounting their past missions together, reminding Zane of the strength he had always shown. Jack knew that the dog needed more than just medical care. He needed the connection, the bond that had kept them both alive in so many dangerous situations before. Slowly, Zane's breathing became less labored, the depth of his breaths gradually returning to a more regular rhythm. The tension in the room began to lift ever so slightly. There was still a long road ahead, but Jack felt a small spark of hope. They had made it through the worst, and now all they had to do was wait. As the hours passed and Zane's condition gradually improved, the medical team worked tirelessly to assess the full extent of his injuries. They carefully removed the bandages, examining the deep wounds on his side, the scarred patches of fur where the cinder block had torn into him. But these physical marks were only the surface of Zane's history. Jack watched closely, feeling a growing sense of concern. Zane's body, though strong and resilient, told a story of relentless battles and sacrifices that most would never understand. As the team worked, they uncovered a series of scars, some fresh, some old, that told of a life spent in the line of duty. There was a deep gash along his flank, likely from an explosive device, and a long scar down his hind leg, a result of an attempt to cut his vocal cords in close combat. Each mark seemed to speak of a different mission, a different moment when Zane had given everything to protect those he loved. The scars weren't just physical, though. As Zane lay there still and vulnerable, Jack couldn't help but think of the countless times Zane had put himself in harm's way for the greater good. The years of sacrifice that no one outside their team would ever know about. Zane wasn't just a dog, he was a soldier, a protector, a partner. "Look at you, huh?" Jack whispered softly, his voice thick with emotion as he gently ran his hand over one of Zane's scars. "You've been through hell, haven't you, buddy? But you're still here." Zane's ears twitched in response, and though he was still barely conscious, Jack took it as a sign that the dog was listening. The bond between them was unspoken but undeniable. Jack continued to stroke Zane's fur, recounting their shared history. Missions in hostile territory, nights spent in cold, dark jungles, and times when Zane had saved his life without question. The deeper the team examined Zane, the more they uncovered about his past. His body was a patchwork of battles fought, a living testament to the horrors of war. But as Jack sat by his side, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Zane had fought for something greater than himself. He had fought for the people who needed him, for the cause, and most of all for Jack. A small flicker of recognition passed through Zane's eyes as Jack spoke to him. It was clear that Zane, even in his weakened state, understood the depth of their connection. He had been through more than any dog should have to endure, but he had always done it with the kind of silent bravery that only a few truly understand. Jack's thoughts drifted as the doctors continued their work. Zane's body had seen more than any dog ever should, and yet Jack knew there was more to this story than what appeared on the surface. The scars, the training, the years spent in the service of others, it all pointed to something bigger. Zane wasn't just any military dog. He had been part of something far more secretive, far more important. As the team finished their examination, they left Jack alone with Zane for a moment. Jack leaned in closer, his hand gently resting on the dog's head. "You're a hero, Zane. Don't let anyone forget that." Jack murmured, his voice cracking slightly. Zane's breathing, though still shallow, seemed to steady. For a moment, it felt like they were the only two in the world, and the rest of the noise, the medical team, the chaos outside, disappeared. There was just Jack and his dog. But even as Zane's wounds were being treated, Jack knew that there was more to uncover, more layers of Zane's history that had yet to be revealed. As the medical team finished their initial work, Jack sat by Zane's side, his hand still resting gently on the dog's head. The steady beeping of monitors and the occasional murmurs of the doctors faded into the background, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts. Zane's breathing had become more regular, and for the first time since the ordeal began, Jack allowed himself a moment to feel a spark of relief. But deep down, he knew this wasn't over. There was something about Zane's past that lingered, and something Jack couldn't quite place. The team finished their examination and left the room briefly, allowing Jack a moment of quiet to be with Zane. But as the doctors were about to leave, one of them, a young medic named Dr. Thompson, approached Jack with a look of curiosity. "Sergeant, we found something," she said, her tone a mix of concern and intrigue. Jack raised an eyebrow, his protective instincts flaring up. "What is it?" Dr. Thompson handed him a medical chart, the paper crinkling slightly in Jack's hand. "When we were cleaning Zane's injuries, we noticed something unusual. There's a scar on his shoulder, a deep one, but what's strange is that it's not just from any injury. It's marked with a code, a specific marking, something military." Jack's stomach dropped. "A code?" He felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of code?" he asked, his voice low. "It looks like a military identification code. It's not something you see on civilian animals or even regular military dogs," Dr. Thompson explained, her voice lowering. "This is more than just a serial number. It's like a call sign, an indication that Zane was part of a covert operation or program." Jack's heart raced. This wasn't just any dog. This was a dog with a past far darker than even he had imagined. "Can you trace it?" he asked, his mind spinning. Dr. Thompson nodded slowly. "We'll need to run some checks through the military records, but this is beyond regular training. It suggests Zane was trained for something special." As the reality of Zane's hidden past began to sink in, Jack felt a sense of awe and sorrow. Zane hadn't just been a soldier. He had been a weapon trained for missions that no one would ever talk about. The scar the code etched into his skin was a testament to the secretive, high-risk nature of Zane's service. This dog had seen things, done things, that Jack could only begin to imagine. Zane, once just a soldier's companion, had been part of a secret program called MWD, Military Working Dog. But the more Jack thought about it, the more he realized the shocking truth: Zane had been abandoned, discarded like a piece of equipment no longer needed. The military had once relied on him, but when he became too old or too injured, he had been cast aside. Jack looked down at Zane, who was still unconscious, his body stitched and bandaged but clearly exhausted from the ordeal. He couldn't imagine what Zane had been through, how much this dog had given for his country. The betrayal Zane must have felt when the military, the very ones who had trained him, decided he was no longer worth keeping. It was a betrayal Jack could feel deep in his own chest. Jack stood up, walking to the window and staring out at the distant horizon. He had always known there was something special about Zane. But this was a revelation. Zane was no ordinary canine. He had been a part of a clandestine operation, and his sacrifices had gone unnoticed by everyone except those who had truly seen his worth. As the weight of the situation settled over him, Jack made a vow in his heart. Zane wouldn't be forgotten. He wouldn't be discarded. He had given everything for his country and his team, and Jack would make sure that Zane received the recognition and honor he deserved. As the hours passed and Zane's condition slowly stabilized, Jack couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness that had settled deep within him. He sat next to Zane, gently stroking the dog's head, his fingers running through the soft fur that was now matted with salt water and blood. The room was silent, except for the faint beeping of medical equipment, but Jack's thoughts were loud and overwhelming. He couldn't help but reflect on the deep bond that had formed between him and this incredible creature. His partner, his protector, his friend. Jack leaned closer to Zane's side, his voice soft but filled with emotion. "You've been through more than anyone could imagine, Zane. More than I ever realized. I'm sorry you had to go through that. But you're safe now. I'm not going to let you be forgotten." Zane's breathing was slow, steady, but there was still a light flicker in his eyes, a sign that the dog could hear him, even if he couldn't respond. Jack's words weren't just a comfort. They were a promise. He would stay by Zane's side no matter what. The bond they shared was forged in the heat of battle, and it had only deepened over the years. Jack leaned back in his chair, staring down at Zane, and his mind began to drift back to their first mission together. It felt like a lifetime ago, but the memories were as clear as if they had happened yesterday. The first time Jack had seen Zane, he had been just another canine in the training unit, but there was something different about him. Zane's gaze had been unwavering, his movements precise, and his loyalty unshakable. Even in training, he had excelled. Jack could still remember the first time Zane saved his life. It had been during a covert operation in a hostile region. Jack's team had been ambushed, and the situation quickly escalated. Gunfire erupted from all sides, and in the chaos, Jack had found himself pinned down behind cover. Zane, however, had moved without hesitation, his instincts guiding him through the mayhem. With a sharp bark, Zane alerted Jack to the position of an enemy sniper, and without missing a beat, the dog took the lead, charging straight toward the threat. The sniper didn't even have a chance to react before Zane tackled him to the ground, incapacitating him long enough for the rest of the team to neutralize the threat. In that moment, Jack had realized that Zane wasn't just a dog. He was a warrior, a partner, and someone who would never leave his side. Their bond was sealed that day. Zane wasn't just a soldier. He was Jack's best friend, his comrade in arms. Jack chuckled softly to himself, remembering how Zane had looked that day, standing proudly beside him after the mission. The dog's chest, puffed out tail wagging fiercely, as if to say, "I've got your back." It was in those moments in the quiet after the storm that Jack realized the depth of their connection. Zane had never asked for anything in return. He simply gave his loyalty and his strength, and in return, Jack had given his trust. They were an unbreakable team. "Thank you, Zane, Jack," whispered his voice, barely audible. "For always being there. For always fighting. I'll fight for you too." As Jack sat there watching over Zane, the dog's steady breathing seemed to reassure him. Their connection, forged in the harshest conditions, had become something more. It was more than just loyalty. It was a friendship, a bond that transcended the battlefield. As Jack sat by Zane's side, his thoughts drifted back to the countless missions they had shared together. There was one in particular that stood out in his mind, a mission so critical, so dangerous that it would forever define their bond. It had been months before the ambush in the desert, and Zane was already a seasoned veteran. The two had worked together seamlessly, but this mission was different. This time they were tasked with clearing a village suspected of harboring explosives. The terrain was treacherous. The village was nestled in the heart of a hostile region, and the air was thick with the scent of danger. Zane's instincts, honed through years of training, were sharper than ever as they navigated through the village. The streets were eerily quiet, but Jack knew that silence, in a place like this, was always the loudest warning. They moved cautiously, Zane leading the way, his nose sniffing the air, his eyes scanning every corner for hidden threats. The moment came swiftly. A sharp bark from Zane, followed by a low growl, was all it took to send Jack into action. Without hesitation, Zane darted toward a pile of rubble, and Jack followed, his heart pounding in his chest. Zane had found something hidden beneath the debris, a bomb. It was a large IED rigged to detonate at the slightest disturbance. Jack froze, his mind racing. There was no time to call for backup. They were on their own. He knew that Zane's training had prepared him for this exact moment. Zane's role was to sniff out the explosives, to alert the team, and then retreat. But what Jack didn't expect was for Zane to do something even braver. The dog's eyes met Jack's, and for a brief second Jack could see the determination, the understanding between them. Zane didn't hesitate. He nudged the bomb, gently signaling Jack to move back. Jack knew this was it. The most dangerous part of the mission, the part where Zane would make the ultimate sacrifice to protect the team. Without warning, Zane let out a sharp bark, signaling that he had triggered something. Jack moved instinctively, pulling Zane out of the blast radius just as the device went off. The explosion was deafening, and the shockwave threw them both to the ground. The air was filled with dust, and Jack's ears rang as he struggled to get back to his feet. When the dust settled, Jack looked down at Zane, who lay motionless beside him. For a moment, Jack's heart stopped. He thought he had lost his partner. But Zane's eyes slowly opened, and his tail, weak but steady, gave a small wag. He was alive. Barely, but alive. The injuries Zane sustained that day would stay with him forever. His body bore the scars of that explosion, burn marks on his fur, deep gashes where shrapnel had torn through his skin. But more than just physical scars, there was the emotional weight of what Zane had done. He had put himself in harm's way to save Jack and the entire team. Jack never forgot that day. It was the day Zane had not only proven his loyalty, but had shown the true depth of his courage and sacrifice. Zane had always been a soldier, but on that day he had been a hero. And Jack, despite the danger, had never once questioned Zane's commitment. Zane had done his duty without hesitation, without question, even when it meant risking everything. Now, as Jack sat beside him, he knew that this was the true measure of their bond. Zane had fought not just for his handler, but for something much bigger. His scars weren't just reminders of the pain he had endured. They were a testament to the sacrifices he had made, to the loyalty and love that had driven him to be more than just a dog. The salty sea breeze hit Jack's face as he stood at the edge of the dock, watching the boat prepare for the mission ahead. The quiet hum of the engines was the only sound that broke the silence of the early morning. Zane, though still recovering from his earlier injuries, stood loyally by Jack's side, his eyes sharp and alert as always. The bond between them had only grown stronger since the explosion. Zane had been through so much, but his spirit remained unbroken. This was a new mission, a different kind of danger. They were no longer just fighting to survive. They were now on the offensive, tasked with tracking down and stopping a dangerous group of smugglers operating along the coast. These criminals were trafficking weapons, and it was up to Jack and his team to stop them before more lives were lost. Zane, despite his injuries, had not hesitated when he heard the orders. He was ready. Jack's team had been briefed. The smugglers were using a freighter, a large ship that had been spotted off the coast. It was heavily guarded, making the operation risky. But with Zane back on the team, Jack knew they had a chance. Zane had always been the best at tracking, and his senses were unparalleled. Together, They would find the smugglers, stop the flow of weapons, and do what they had always done, protect others at all costs. As Jack and Zane climbed onto the boat, the crew greeted them with cautious respect. It wasn't just the usual exchange of nods. There was a quiet acknowledgement of the bond Jack and Zane shared. The team had always known Zane as a reliable and capable dog, but the events of the past few days, the sacrifice, the resilience, had transformed their view. Zane was no longer just another member of the team. He was a symbol of loyalty and courage. Zane's return to the field was more than just the return of a war dog. It was the return of a hero. And it wasn't just Jack who knew this. The rest of the team, some of whom had once viewed Zane as nothing more than a tool, now recognized his true value. The transformation wasn't immediate, but over time it became clear. Zane wasn't just a dog. He was a warrior, and he had earned his place among them. As the boat set off into the open sea, Jack could feel the weight of the mission ahead. It was no longer just about taking down smugglers. It was about something deeper. It was about redemption, about giving Zane the honor he deserved. Jack glanced down at Zane, who stood at attention beside him. The dog's head turned slightly, sensing Jack's gaze, and their eyes met, a moment of mutual understanding, as if they both knew that this mission would be different. The horizon stretched ahead of them, the vast ocean, both a challenge and a comfort. Jack tightened his grip on the railing, ready for whatever lay ahead. But with Zane by his side, he knew they would face it together. The sea had once taken so much from them, but now it would give them the opportunity to right a wrong. The sea had always been a powerful and unforgiving force, but for Jack and Zane it was a necessary challenge. Their mission, now more crucial than ever, was to stop a group of dangerous smugglers trafficking weapons. As the boat sliced through the water, Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This wasn't just another mission, this was redemption, not only for Zane, but for everything they had been through together. The boat crested over a wave, and in the distance Jack spotted the shape of a freighter. It was moving quickly, cutting across the sea like a dark shadow against the horizon. The intel was clear. This was the vessel they had been tracking. The smugglers were aboard, and this was their chance to stop them before they could offload their deadly cargo. "Ready, Zane," Jack whispered, though he knew the dog didn't need words. Zane's eyes were already focused on the freighter, his body taut with anticipation. Jack's hand instinctively reached down to give Zane a quick pat on the head, a silent promise that they would face whatever came next together. The bond between them had never been stronger. The crew aboard the boat prepared for the boarding operation. As they approached the freighter, the tension in the air was palpable. Jack signaled to his team and they readied their gear. The operation was simple in its objective: board the ship, neutralize the threat, and secure the weapons. But the unknowns were what made it dangerous. Zane's senses, sharper than any human's, were already working. His ears perked up, his nostrils flaring as he took in the scent of the ocean air mixed with the familiar metallic scent of firearms. Jack watched him closely. Zane's posture shifted slightly. He had caught wind of something. His instincts were spot on, and Jack knew it. The boat crept closer to the freighter, and as they neared the hull, Jack signaled for the team to disembark. Zane was the first to leap onto the side of the freighter, his paws landing silently on the steel deck. Jack followed close behind, his weapon-drawn eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The moment their feet hit the freighter, Zane's low growl filled the air. It was faint, but enough to alert Jack that something wasn't right. Zane's nose twitched as he sniffed the air, and Jack knew the dog had already picked up on something hidden. The crew moved quickly, searching every corner of the ship, but it was Zane who led the way, his keen senses guiding them toward the source of the threat. "Zane, stay close," Jack ordered, his voice low but firm. Zane moved with precision. Staying a few steps ahead, his eyes scanning the shadows, his body coiled and ready to spring into action at the first sign of danger. They moved deeper into the ship toward the cargo hold where the weapons were stashed. The door to the hold was reinforced, locked from the inside, but Zane's growl grew louder as they approached. Jack signaled for the team to stop. Zane's nose twitched again, and then in a flash the dog darted toward the door, scratching and whining in distress. There was something inside, something deadly, and Zane had sensed it before Jack had even seen it. Zane's growl grew more intense, his body tense as he moved closer to the door of the cargo hold. Jack could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The situation had just shifted from dangerous to critical. Zane had picked up on something far worse than they had initially anticipated. Jack motioned for the team to fall back, taking a defensive position as they awaited Zane's next move. The dog's instincts were sharper than anyone else's, and Jack knew that when Zane acted this way, there was no room for hesitation. They were up against something more than just smugglers. Zane continued to scratch at the door, whining in distress, his growls now a deep rumble that echoed throughout the silent ship. The team moved in, readying their weapons, but Jack held up a hand to stop them. "Wait. Let Zane lead," he ordered. Zane was the first to move again, pacing back and forth in front of the door. His nose twitched, and suddenly he stopped, his eyes narrowing. He was on the scent. Something deadly was hidden behind that door. The cargo hold was supposed to contain only weapons, but Zane's reaction told Jack that there was more at stake here. This wasn't just a simple weapons run, it was a ticking time bomb. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped forward cautiously. He reached down to Zane's head, gently ruffling the dog's fur. "Stay with me, buddy," he whispered, knowing full well that Zane's instincts would be the key to navigating what came next. With a sharp bark, Zane suddenly leaped at the door, his powerful frame slamming into it with all the force of his training. The door, unable to withstand the impact, swung open, revealing a sight Jack had not expected. Inside, stacked among crates of illegal firearms, were several high-tech devices, bombs rigged to detonate with a signal. The smugglers hadn't just been trafficking weapons, they had a far more sinister plan. The bombs linked to the weapons would have been sold to the highest bidder: terrorists, militants, anyone who could cause chaos. Zane barked again, his stance rigid as he stared at the bomb-rigged crates. His body was shaking from the effort, but he didn't move. Jack felt a chill wash over him. They had to stop this. Now. The lives of countless people were at stake, and they couldn't let this shipment get out. Jack quickly motioned for the team to move into the cargo hold, their weapons aimed and ready. The team moved in silently, scanning the area for any movement. Zane, still standing at the door, was the first to detect the subtle change in the atmosphere. His eyes darted around and he immediately barked again, even louder this time. Jack knew what that meant. The smugglers were close and they were ready for a fight. The door to the hold suddenly burst open from the other side and 2 armed smugglers came into view, guns raised. The situation went from bad to worse in an instant. Zane, despite his previous injuries, lunged forward, his teeth bared. He moved with the speed and precision that Jack had always admired. In an instant, he tackled one of the smugglers to the ground, pinning him with ease. Jack's team sprang into action, gunfire exchanged in the narrow space, the fight escalating into chaos. The other smuggler, realizing the tables were turning, tried to draw his weapon, but Zane was already on him. With a sharp bark, Zane charged again, knocking the smuggler down with a powerful strike. Jack moved in, taking down the remaining threat in a clean shot, securing the area. The room was filled with the noise of scrambling feet and the silence of victory, but it wasn't over yet. Zane's quick thinking and bravery had given them the upper hand, but they still needed to neutralize the bombs before they could escape. Jack, panting from the fight, looked down at Zane, who stood victorious, breathing heavily but proud. The dog's loyalty and courage had been undeniable once again, and Jack couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for his partner. The aftermath of the skirmish left the room in a disarray of spent shells, broken crates, and the bodies of the fallen smugglers. Jack stood over them, his chest heaving, as adrenaline slowly drained from his system. The immediate danger had passed, but there was still work to be done. The team moved quickly to secure the bombs and the weapons cache, but Jack's gaze remained fixed on Zane. The dog stood a few feet away, panting, heavily bloodied but unbowed. His fur was matted, his body covered in bruises, but his eyes shone with pride. Zane had done more than just save the day. He had once again proven that he was not just a dog, but a warrior, a protector who was willing to give everything to safeguard his team. "Good boy, Zane," Jack muttered, his voice thick with emotion. He knelt down beside his partner, his hand gently resting on the dog's head. Zane's tail gave a faint wag as if acknowledging the praise, but there was more in his eyes. Zane wasn't looking for recognition, but Jack knew how much it meant. The bond between them had always been deep, but moments like this made it clear just how unbreakable their connection was. Jack turned to the rest of the team who were finishing up the final steps of securing the area. Their eyes met his, and in that moment they all understood what had just transpired. Zane had been more than just a military asset. He had been a soldier, a comrade, and a hero. His actions had not only saved the mission, but had saved their lives. "Damn," Sergeant McKinney said, breaking the silence. "Zane's the real hero here. That dog, he's been through hell and back." "We all know how tough he is," Lieutenant Rhodes added, his voice quiet but full of respect. "But what he just did? That was something else." Jack nodded, his eyes locked on Zane. "He's more than just a dog. He's family." There was a pause as the team reflected on Zane's actions. It wasn't just the bravery in the face of danger. It was the loyalty, the silent promise that Zane had made to them all. He had fought not just for survival, but for them, for Jack. "He's earned his place in the history books," Jack said, standing up and wiping the sweat from his brow. "Zane is a part of this team, and I'll be damned if anyone forgets that." There was a collective nod from the team, each of them acknowledging the truth in Jack's words. Zane had fought with them, bled with them, and now in the eyes of everyone in that room, Zane was no longer just a military dog. He was a member of their unit, a soldier who had proven time and time again that loyalty and sacrifice went beyond the human species. As the team continued their work securing the freighter, Jack stayed by Zane's side, offering comfort and encouragement. The dog's resilience was awe-inspiring, but it was also a reminder of the sacrifices they had all made, of the bonds that held them together, and of the love that transcended the battlefield. The mission had been a success. The smugglers were neutralized, the weapons cache dismantled, and the danger to countless lives had been averted. But amidst the relief and the satisfaction of a job well done, there was a palpable shift in the way the team saw Zane. He was no longer just a dog. He was a soldier who had more than earned his place beside them. Jack stood with Zane at his side, the dog still recovering from the wounds and the wear of the mission. The air was thick with the unspoken understanding that Zane had done something extraordinary. His actions had saved lives, but more than that, they had reminded everyone of the true meaning of loyalty, sacrifice, and courage. As the team gathered for the debrief, the room was heavy with respect. The officers who had once seen Zane as just another tool in their arsenal now saw him for what he truly was, a warrior who had fought as fiercely and selflessly as any human soldier. They had all witnessed Zane's heroism, and they could no longer ignore the truth. Zane was not just a canine. He was a member of their team. "Zane," Jack began, his voice firm but filled with emotion. "This mission, what we've been through, none of it would have been possible without you. You've earned a place here with us as much as any soldier on this team." The room fell silent as Jack's words sank in. The men and women who had fought beside Zane, who had once seen him as nothing more than a trained dog, now stood in awe of the animal's unwavering loyalty and courage. It wasn't just Zane's actions during the mission that had impressed them. It was the lifetime of sacrifice and service that had led to this moment. Captain Davis, a seasoned leader who had seen countless soldiers come and go, nodded in approval. "Jack's right," he said, his voice steady. "Zane's sacrifice, his loyalty, it's more than just doing a job. It's about honor, and he's earned it." Zane's eyes locked with Davis's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The dog's tail gave a slight wag, and for the first time since the mission began, Zane seemed to relax, as though the weight of the battle had lifted. The tension in the room began to ease, replaced by a new sense of camaraderie and respect. Zane, despite the toll the mission had taken on him, still stood tall beside Jack. The dog's wounds were serious, but they were not fatal, and his spirit remained unbroken. Jack was proud of his partner, of the courage Zane had shown and the sacrifices he had made. But this was not the end of Zane's journey. It was only the beginning. Jack leaned down to Zane, his voice soft but resolute. "You've earned more than just respect, Zane. You've earned your place here. No more being forgotten. No more being cast aside. Jack stood up, looking around at the team. We're going to make sure everyone knows that. You're part of this team, your family. The room filled with the weight of Jack's words finally erupted into a collective nod. Zane's heroism had been recognized, and the respect he had earned was tangible in the air. For the first time, Zane wasn't just another soldier's companion. He was a hero in his own right. Zane's transformation from a discarded war dog to a revered hero was completed in the most fitting of ways. He was awarded a medal for his bravery and sacrifice. The ceremony was simple, but to Jack it was everything. The respect that Zane had earned was not just through action, but through years of loyalty, sacrifice, and resilience. The sun hung low in the sky as the small gathering took place on the deck of the ship, the same sea that had once been their battleground, now acting as the backdrop for Zane's recognition. Jack stood beside him, his pride palpable. Zane's body was still healing from the wounds sustained during the mission, but the dog stood tall, his head high, as if the weight of the past few days had disappeared. The medics had treated him, and though his injuries would take time to fully recover from, Zane had already proven what mattered most, his unbreakable spirit. The commanding officer, Captain Davis, stood at the front of the ceremony. His voice was steady and filled with respect as he began. Today we honor a soldier who has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that bravery knows no boundaries. Zane, though a canine, has demonstrated the courage and sacrifice that any soldier would be proud of. His actions during the mission have saved lives, and his loyalty to his handler, Sergeant Jack Hayes, is unmatched. Zane stood still, his eyes locked on Jack's as if understanding the gravity of the moment. His tail twitched ever so slightly, a small but unmistakable gesture of pride. Jack's heart swelled as he looked at the dog. This moment wasn't just a victory for Zane. It was a victory for all the soldiers who had ever overlooked the true power of the bond between a handler and their dog. It was a victory for the silent heroes, the unsung warriors who fought beside the men and women in uniform but never received the recognition they deserved. Captain Davis continued, "For his actions in the line of duty, for his unyielding loyalty, and for his bravery in the face of death, I am honored to present Zane with the Distinguished Service Medal." As the medal was draped around Zane's neck, Jack's emotions surged. He had always known Zane was a hero, but to see others acknowledge it so publicly felt like a full circle. Zane wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a symbol of what true sacrifice and loyalty looked like. Jack kneeled down beside Zane, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did it, buddy," he whispered, the emotion in his voice unmistakable. Zane's eyes met his, and for a moment it felt as though they were the only two in the world. The ceremony continued, but Jack and Zane were lost in their own connection, a bond that had been forged through blood, sweat, and years of unwavering loyalty. Zane had gone from being a discarded tool forgotten by the system to becoming a hero in his own right. His past, though marked by neglect, no longer defined him. What defined Zane now were the scars of battle, the loyalty he had shown, and the immense courage that had led him to this moment of recognition. The sun was beginning to set over the horizon, casting an orange glow across the ocean. The boat gently rocked in the calm waters, a quiet stillness settling over the crew. Jack sat on the edge of the deck, his gaze fixed on the vast sea in front of him. Beside him, Zane lay, his head resting on Jack's knee, his body still recovering from the events of the mission. The medal that now hung around Zane's neck glinted faintly in the fading light. It was a symbol of the dog's courage, of his sacrifice, and of the bond that had grown between them. A bond forged in the heat of battle through shared hardships and through loyalty that transcended everything. Jack looked down at Zane, feeling a deep sense of gratitude welling up inside him. The dog, despite everything he had been through, despite the years of sacrifice and the betrayals, was still here by his side, as loyal as ever. In the quiet of that moment, Jack understood something deeper than just the acts of courage they had both witnessed. It wasn't just the battles they had fought or the missions they had completed. It was the unwavering loyalty Zane had shown even when no one else had. "You're not just a dog, Zane," Jack whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "You're family. You've shown me what true loyalty means. You've never once given up on me, even when the world turned its back on you." Zane's ears perked up at the sound of Jack's voice, his eyes meeting his handler's. There was an understanding in those eyes, a recognition that no words were needed. Jack smiled, the weight of their shared journey heavy in his chest, but also lightened by the quiet moment of peace they now shared. Jack reflected on the past. He remembered the early days when Zane was just another military canine trained to detect explosives and assist in combat operations. He remembered their first mission together, the bond that had formed between them despite the chaos and the violence. Zane had always been more than just a partner. He had been a source of strength and anchor in the storm. Through every mission, every life-threatening situation, Zane had remained by Jack's side. Even when they had both been abandoned by the system, when Zane had been cast aside as just another tool, Jack had never wavered in his belief that Zane was worth more than anyone realized. He had fought for Zane, and Zane had fought for him with a loyalty that couldn't be measured by any rank or title. Now, as Jack sat next to his dog, he realized that Zane had taught him something far more important than just military tactics or survival. Zane had shown him the true meaning of sacrifice. Zane had fought not for glory or recognition, but for the simple act of protecting those he loved. He had given everything without question or hesitation. That kind of loyalty was rare, and it was something Jack would carry with him for the rest of his life. For the first time, Jack saw the full picture. Zane had given up so much, but in return he had received something far greater, a bond that would never be broken, a friendship that transcended the battlefield. The world had often forgotten Zane. The military had cast him aside as if he were disposable. But Jack knew better. Zane was a hero not because of the battles he had fought, but because of the love and loyalty he had shown. As Jack sat beside Zane, the weight of their shared journey pressed heavily on his heart. He looked at the dog who had given everything for the mission, for the team, and for him. In the quiet of the evening, as the sky slowly darkened, Jack thought back on everything they had been through. How they had fought side by side, how Zane had faced danger without hesitation, and how they had both been cast aside by a system that should have known better. Yet despite it all, Zane had never given up. He had never stopped fighting. Zane's journey wasn't just about his service as a military canine. It was a journey about resilience, loyalty, and love, qualities that had made Zane the hero he was. He had been abandoned, forgotten, left to die in the sea like a broken tool. But despite the betrayal, Zane had never lost his heart, never lost his loyalty. And in that moment, sitting there on the ship's deck, Jack knew that Zane had taught him the most important lesson of all: true loyalty and sacrifice aren't defined by recognition or rewards. They are defined by the heart. Jack had seen soldiers come and go. He had witnessed bravery in many forms, but there was something undeniably special about Zane's loyalty. It was a loyalty that went beyond duty, beyond rank. Zane had served without asking for anything in return. He had given his everything, his safety, his well-being, his life, and yet he asked for nothing but to be by Jack's side. Through all the pain, the battles, and the hardships, Zane had never wavered. He had put his faith in Jack, and Jack had returned that faith with every ounce of his being. They were partners in every sense of the word. Their connection was built not just on military training or shared experiences, but on a bond that transcended both. It was the kind of bond that only comes from a deep understanding and respect for one another, something Jack knew he would never take for granted again. In that moment, Jack realized that the true measure of Zane's heroism wasn't in the battles he had won, the lives he had saved, or the medals he had earned. It was in the quiet moments like this when Zane simply sat beside him, a loyal companion, a true friend. Jack had learned that loyalty was not just a quality to admire, it was a quality to live by. Looking at Zane, Jack's heart swelled with pride. "You've taught me more than I could ever repay," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me what it means to never give up no matter what. You've shown me the true meaning of sacrifice, and for that I'll always be grateful." Jack turned to face the horizon, a sense of peace settling over him. The journey had been long and filled with challenges, but they had made it through together. Zane's journey, from being abandoned to being a hero, was a testament to the power of loyalty, sacrifice, and friendship. And as Jack looked at the dog sitting proudly beside him, he knew that the lessons they had learned together would stay with him forever. Zane's journey from being abandoned and forgotten to becoming a hero serves as a powerful reminder of the incredible loyalty and sacrifice that animals, especially German Shepherds, offer without hesitation. Their commitment to serving and protecting goes beyond training. It is driven by an innate love and dedication that cannot be matched. Zane, though once cast aside, showed the world that true strength lies not in the recognition we receive, but in the quiet acts of service and love we offer to those who need it most. The story of Zane is not just a tribute to a dog's bravery, it is a call to recognize the value of animals, especially working dogs in our lives. They are not just pets or tools, they are partners, companions, and friends who stand by us through thick and thin. The bond between a handler and their dog is unlike any other, built on trust, respect, and a shared commitment to something greater than themselves. German Shepherds, like Zane, embody these values of loyalty and selflessness. Their strength, intelligence, and devotion make them not only exceptional working dogs, but also remarkable beings deserving of our admiration and care. As we move forward, let us remember to honor and cherish these incredible animals for the sacrifices they make and the unconditional love they give. The lessons from Zane's story extend far beyond the battlefield. It is a reminder that loyalty, sacrifice, and love are the cornerstones of any meaningful relationship, human or animal. Let us embrace the positive message of this journey and strive to be as loyal, dedicated, and loving as the animals that stand beside us.